Cody, along with my co-host, Dr. Pettis Perry. Hey, Pettis, how are you today?
I'm doing okay, Jill. How are you doing today?
You couldn't join us for the last program on disinformation because of your computer nightmares. I'm afraid to ask, have they gotten any better?
They're better, but apparently not over. I hope my audio is okay today.
You sound good to me.
Awesome.
Cool. So, on with the program. Our program today is Smart Politics. Stop arguing, stop avoiding, start making a difference. Do you dread talking politics with your Republican family? Many of us hate the idea of having political conversations with our Republican family members. We may even avoid them to keep peace. When having a political conversation, do they soon go sideways? In Smart Politics, you learn how to set boundaries and utilize the change conversation cycle. If you're worried about the rise of authoritarianism, concerned about the climate crisis, or committed to ending systemic racism, talking about politics with Republican family members and friends isn't just a good thing to do. Our guest says it's a moral obligation. Our future depends on it. Hey, Pettis, would you like to introduce our guest today and kick off the topic?
I absolutely would, Jill. I'm very excited about today's show. Dr. Karin Tamerius is a political psychiatrist and the founder of Smart Politics, a nonprofit that teaches progressives how to communicate more productively and persuasively with people who disagree with them, including conservatives. Dr. Tamerius holds a BA in political science from UC Berkeley and an MD from UC San Francisco. Dr. Tamerius teaches us how to develop a powerful voice in 3 persuasive ways. First, to lower defensiveness by creating safer spaces for conversations. Second, to connect and build trust so people listen to our perspectives. And third, to reduce bias by encouraging empathy, rationality, and self-reflection. We have big things to do. Oh, Jill, I think it's going to be one of those shows. Welcome.
It's always fun. It's always fun.
It is at that. Welcome to Be Bold America, Dr. Tamerius.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
My first 2 questions for you today are, what is a political psychiatrist, which I think is a fascinating term in and of itself, and also what motivated you to create and launch Smart Politics?
Yeah, so there aren't many political psychiatrists out there in the world, as you may have guessed. What I do is I combine the practice of politics and an understanding of how people think about politics with my clinical skills as a psychiatrist. So the knowledge I have as from political science is really as a political psychologist. I not only have a BA, but I also went to graduate school in political science and studied psychology that way. And then after I went to medical school and specialized in psychiatry, I realized how nicely these blended together. I got my start in this, you don't really set out to be a political psychiatrist. It's kind of something you stumble into, and that's what happened to me. I started out in a PhD program in political science and was, almost there, but I hadn't picked a dissertation topic yet. And I realized that I didn't want to be an academic. It just wasn't the life that interested me. And so I followed my interest in psychology and how people think, and that led me to medicine because I wanted to understand the brain better, and I became a psychiatrist. And I was doing the psychiatry thing, and then the 2016 election came along, and that got me thinking a lot about politics again. And it was that point that I realized I didn't actually understand people who disagreed with me. I didn't understand, despite all of my training in political science, why people were voting for Donald Trump. And as a progressive, I was really concerned about the future. So I set out and started talking with people who disagreed with me so that I could actually understand where they were coming from. And at first, it was really, really hard. I got to tell you, I am not the kind of person who naturally sits back and listens to people, even though I was trained to do that as a psychiatrist. In the political realm, I was pretty vocal about my opinions and didn't listen to what other people thought. So this took a lot of work on my part to shift my orientation. But once I did, an amazing thing happened. I started to discover that when I took the time to actually listen to what other people thought, and really work to understand them, eventually we reached a place where they turned to me and said, well, what do you think? And why do you think that? And suddenly I started having an influence on what they were thinking. And it was at that point where kind of a light bulb went off for me, and I realized, oh, I can actually shift the way people think by just changing the way I interact. And the skills that I'm using right now to have these conversations are skills I know as a psychiatrist. I was behaving much more like a therapist in these conversations than the way I'd always thought of as a political advocate behaves. And at that point, I created Smart Politics because I knew I could teach these skills to other people.
Well, I think that's a fascinating story, and someday I hope we could talk about getting a doctorate and whether or not you have to be an academic, because I'm certainly not an academic with mine as well. So there are lots of routes for us.
You keep saying that, Pettis, but you're a professor at a university.
But that doesn't necessarily make you an academic. I am an educator.
You're an educator.
Not an academic. And we have these disputes at the university level. I think this is fascinating, your melding of the two domains. And I think it, coming at the time that you did, has had to have a profound shift, as you were talking about, in your thinking. But I think it's so necessary in this day and time because of where we sit in our polarization, and we're talking at each other, if we're talking at all, and not really with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we have a tremendous amount of polarization in this country, and it isn't serving anyone. As a progressive, one of the big things I had to realize was that being angry at people who disagreed with me wasn't accomplishing my goals. It didn't do any good to be mad at people who thought differently or to make them feel bad about thinking differently. One of the things that I look back on and I'm kind of amazed by is I've always known as a political scientist that, you know, people aren't born with their political beliefs. They are socialized into their political beliefs. And so if a person has beliefs I disagree with, it has nothing to do with who they are as a human being. It's about the environment in which they came of age politically. And if people can be socialized into a set of beliefs, they can also change their beliefs. And so whenever I go into an interaction with people I disagree with now, it's with the understanding that what they are sharing with me is really just a product of the environment in which they grew up. And that's what we talk about. You know, how they came to develop their beliefs and what why certain things are so important to them. And as we talk through that, they start to change their beliefs themselves. I don't have to tell them what to think. They figure it out.
Well, I was thinking as you were talking, Karin, that I sure could have used a political psychiatrist the day after Donald Trump was elected. There was a big knot in my stomach that grew to a boulder, and I don't think it's gone away since. So I think this is a terrific role because our politics it's hard to separate who we are. The personal is really political. Our personal interactions have political consequences. And so I think that's an excellent role and point. And we did, Pettis and I did take one of your webinars, and I think you mentioned there about our political sphere of influence can't influence at great distances. We have the power with our inner ring of people that we interact with every day. That's where our greatest power lies. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make when they go into political activism is thenking that their power lies as a citizen influencing elected officials. And yeah, there's some power there, but it's pretty attenuated. And where the heart of your power is with the people who are closest to you, your friends, your family, your neighbors. When you have conversations with those people, you can have a dramatic impact on how they think and how they view the world. And in that way, you can have an impact on politicians, but it radiates outward from that inner circle. It's not you acting to influence a member of Congress that really makes the difference.
Well, I think, we were talking about the shift, and it's very hard to not be mad at someone else when you're feeling, attacked yourself because they're saying, you don't think, you're not hearing me, or you're not doing what I think you should be doing. Sometimes I feel I'm talking to a brick wall because if I mention something that they come up with something else, and I'm trying to bat things away and down, and so it's hard to not be frustrated with that. How do you just keep the emotions at bay while you're doing this work?
Yeah, that's a great question. In some ways, the first step in this work is getting control of your own emotions and getting to a place where the things other people do kind of bounce off of you. They don't hit you too hard. You've got to learn to be calm and centered and respond, not react. And so I've really gone through a process of kind of desensitizing myself. For people who are familiar with treatments, for example, for phobias or post-traumatic stress disorder, what I essentially do is exposure therapy. It's forcing myself to sit with things that are really triggering and really disturbing until I calm down, until my nervous system stops reacting, and gradually building my tolerance. So with phobias, for example, if someone has a fear of spiders, the way we treat it in mental health is we start them out with things that are just mildly threatening. So we might have them hold a photograph of a spider rather than putting them in the same room with a spider. And they sit with that, look at the photograph until they calm down. And then we move to something bigger where maybe we have a spider in a jar at the other side of the room, and they sit with that experience until they calm down. And we keep climbing the stair of threat until eventually they're able to, hold a tarantula in their hand. And in politics, it's essentially the same thing. Like, we have experiences that really activate us emotionally. Thinking about when Trump was elected, initially that was tremendously upsetting for me too. And I couldn't read the newspaper right after he was elected. I couldn't watch television. I couldn't listen to the radio whenever then Trump's name was being mentioned all the time. And I realized, no, I have to be able to tolerate this if I'm going to have conversations with people, if I'm going to be an effective activist. So I would force myself to sit there and listen to things, and I would do deep breathing exercises until I calmed down a little bit. And just wait it out, riding the wave. And eventually my nervous system acclimated. So my opinions didn't change, but it's not like I'm flooded with strong feelings every time I encounter Donald Trump now.
Well, that's really fascinating. I still don't know if I have the courage to hold a picture of Donald Trump in my hand, but you're listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7 FM. Many voices, one station. Listen globally online from the ksqd.org website. We're speaking with Dr. Karin Tamerius, who is a political psychiatrist and the founder of Smart Politics, a nonprofit that teaches progressives how to communicate more productively and persuasively with people who disagree with them, including conservatives. Learn more at joinsmart.org. I'm your host, Jill Cody.
Join KSQD Sunday evening at 6 p.m. as Ronnie Lipschitz looks at the geopolitical crisis developing in Eastern Europe, where the United States and Russia are facing off over the future of Ukraine. Ronnie speaks with Anatol Lieven from the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, whose goal is to move our foreign policy away from war and towards vigorous diplomacy in pursuit of peace. Lieven worked as a British journalist in the Soviet Union and covered the wars in Afghanistan and Chechnya. Among his books is Ukraine and Russia, a fraternal rivalry. That's Sunday from 6 to 7 p.m. here on KSQD 90.7 FM and ksqd.org. Many voices, one station.
If you're just joining us, I'm your host, Jill Cody, along with my co-host, Dr. Pettis Perry. Our topic is Smart Politics. Stop arguing, stop avoiding, start making a difference. We're speaking with Dr. Karin Tamerius, who is a political psychiatrist and the founder of Smart Politics. Dr. Tamerius has pioneered the development of tools to help individuals, activists, and organizations share their message in a way that others can hear them in their homes and in their communities. Learn more and sign up for webinars at joinsmart.org. Now, Karin, I've seen the movie The Brainwashing of My Dad 2 times. Jen Senko is going to be on our program, I think, in April. And having watched that movie 2 times, and you learn that all of his life he had been open to, he wasn't a racist, open to immigration, he had strong values, a fairly easygoing guy, and then he got a job that caused him to need to be in his car a lot, and he got hooked on Rush Limbaugh. And he completely changed. He started speaking ill of African Americans and immigrants, and he wasn't as pleasant to live with at home. And I just wondered, how does you let go of principles and your moral code so quickly? How does this transformation even happen that happened in this movie?
Yeah, that was such a powerful film.
Isn't it? I recommend it to everyone.
Absolutely.
And it has a happy ending. It does have a happy ending.
Right. No, so the first thing to keep in mind with all of this is a perfect example of how powerful environment is, right? This is a person who their whole life was one way, and you changed their environment, and there was a major transformation. And then when their environment was changed back, he went back to being who he had been before. And one of the things we, as human beings, do is we tend to underestimate the power of environment on human behavior. There's actually a cognitive bias known as the fundamental attribution error. And what it says is that when we try to explain the behavior of others, and particularly in situations where people are doing things that we don't approve of, we tend to reach for explanations based in character. We say that person did that because they are a bad person, or they are an ignorant person, or they are, a selfish person. In reality, in almost all of those situations, people are doing things because of the environment in which they find themselves. And when you change someone's environment so that the only information they're getting about the world pushes their viewpoint in a particular direction, it's very, very hard for them to go against that flow. Another thing to keep in mind is how we have a tendency to follow the beliefs of those we like, right? So once her father developed an affection for Rush Limbaugh, pretty much everything that Rush Limbaugh said came with a halo effect, basically. And that made it much more enticing and acceptable. And since he wasn't spending that much time comparatively with people who disagreed with that view, there was a lot of psychological pressure to just accept everything that Rush Limbaugh said. So that's one of the ways in which our belief systems shift, is this kind of pressure toward getting rid of cognitive dissonance. We want everything in our belief system and our environment to all fit together nicely. And so if we feel positive about one person, we want to feel positive about all of the things they say and all the things they do. And that creates a pressure to shift belief.
It's interesting that could happen. It's interesting that can happen to somebody he's never met or known, and takes them away from his wife and his daughter. And another thing that I was thinking of with your work is about, you mentioned cognitive bias, but there's also the backfire effect, which is when your deepest convictions are challenged by contradictory evidence, which I would think would also be stories. Their beliefs get stronger. How does your work, or what are your thoughts around the backfire effect and your communicating to Republicans?
Yeah, the backfire effect is an interesting thing because the evidence on it is actually kind of mixed. The original studies have come under a little bit of question. But
I'm kind of happy to hear that.
Yeah.
I am.
Well, it's one of those things where the story is basically more complicated than we originally thought. So what often happens is that when you question someone's beliefs and their facts, right, they will try to push back against that because we have a natural inclination to defend whatever beliefs we currently have. And the more central those beliefs are to our belief system and our personal needs, the more we'll defend them. But sometimes if you show someone very clearly that the facts are incorrect, that what they believe is wrong, they will accept that, but what they won't accept is the part about what the implications of that. Let me give you an example because I know this is highly abstract. But let's say you're talking with someone about the need for climate regulations, right? So limit CO2 into the atmosphere because we're concerned about climate change. And the person says, well, I don't believe that climate change is a real problem. And so you get into a really serious debate with them about showing them the relationship between increasing CO2 in the atmosphere and the increasing temperature of the Earth. And you go through a full presentation, and eventually they're like, you know what? Yeah, it does look like you're right. The temperature has been increasing as CO2 increased. But I don't believe that means we should regulate CO2 emissions, because actually that doesn't have anything to do with it's not human made. This is like natural shifts, and natural shifts happen all the time. So you may change their understanding of a single fact, but what you're not changing is their position on the issue. And what's happening there is rationalization. And what a lot of people, when they're talking about politics, don't understand is that the way human beings make their opinions about politics isn't looking at the evidence and coming up with reasons and sorting through all of that and then forming their political opinions. What the science shows is that people form their political opinions and then come up with facts and reasons to justify them. So when we challenge people's facts and reasons, even if we succeed in changing those, they'll just come up with new facts and new reasons to justify the existing position. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I think this might be a good time to take our break. And then in the next segment, what I thought might be really helpful to listeners is to do a role play on your change conversation cycle. So you're listening.
That sounds great.
Yeah, you're listening to our guest, Dr. Karin Tamerius, who is a political psychiatrist and the founder of Smart Politics, a nonprofit that teaches progressives how to communicate more productively and persuasively with people who disagree with them, including conservatives. Learn more at joinsmart.org. And also, like the Smart Politics Facebook page. In addition, if you'd like to be added to our news group, you may text Be Bold America to 22828. Text Be Bold America to 22828. And thank you to those who've done so already. I'm your host, Jill Cody.
Right before our eyes, an invaluable American species is fast disappearing from view. Cartoonus americanus. These are newspaper cartoonists who've long delighted readers and infuriated power elites. And there's nothing natural about their sudden decline. It's not the result of a dwindling talent pool, and certainly not due to a lack of political targets. Rather, what's happening is that their media habitat is being intentionally destroyed. Around the start of the 20th century, some 2,000 newspapers featured their own full-time cartoonists. But in just the last decade, those healthy media environments have shriveled. So now, only a couple of dozen newspapers have these vibrant artistic journalists on staff. One major reason is that most U.S. papers have been gobbled up by profiteering hedge funds that have merged, purged, and plundered these essential local sources of news and democratic discourse. The overriding interest of these Wall Street owners is to cash out a paper's financial assets and haul off the booty to boost their personal wealth. Journalism and democracy be damned. Thus, they view cartoonists as a paycheck that can be easily diverted into their corporate pockets, dismissing the fact that enjoying good local cartoonists ranks as one of the top reasons people give for buying the paper. Note that this mass extermination is not old-school media censorship, but sleight-of-hand money censorship by the new monopolistic order of newspapering. Political cartoonists are still free to express any opinion they want, but the Wall Street system locks them out of their primary marketplace. Censorship is ugly, but eliminating paychecks, well, that's just business. This is Jim Hightower saying, yet these freewheeling spirits of the cartooning craft are inventing new ways to connect with America's strong demand for their fun and important work. To connect with them, go to editorialcartoonist.com. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you lowdowners who subscribe to our monthly newsletter, The Hightower Lowdown. You know who you are. Thank you.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Jill Cody, here with my co-host, Dr. Pettis Perry. You're listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7 FM. Many voices, one station. Listen globally online from the ksqd.org website. And we're listening to our bold guest, Dr. Karin Tamerius, who is a political psychiatrist and the founder of Smart Politics. And Pettis, before we go into our role play, I thought I'd ask you if you had a question for our doctor.
I do. Before you get into the role play, would you talk a little bit about the system itself, what you teach people to do? But before you get into that, there are two situations that I think we're at an impasse, and that's with the Russians and Biden, and also Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin in terms of the filibuster. In either of those cases, do you think that your system for bridging those conversations might be effective?
Interesting. Yes, I think this methodology is useful in any conversation where people disagree with each other. These are basic skills that everybody needs to have. I would hope that in the conversations that are happening at these high levels, that the people who are having them have some really good skills. So when Biden is talking with Sinema or Manchin, that he's using something along these lines, and that when he's talking with Putin, he's using something along these lines. Often what I find is that people who are really good communicators naturally and who have been in politics for a long time already have these skills. It's really people who avoid talking about politics in their personal lives, or who tend to get into arguments when talking to people in their personal lives, who can most benefit from learning this methodology.
Interesting. Would you talk a little bit about the system itself? What you teach people to go through, which may be instructive as you're going through the role play?
Absolutely. So it's a 5-step model of dialogue, and if you're initiating a conversation, you start with asking questions. And it's important that the question you ask is open-ended and non-threatening and curious. You're not going into this conversation as an attorney trying to make a point. You're going into this conversation with an interest in learning about what the other person thinks and how they develop their views. The second thing you need to do is when the other person starts to answer the question, you need to actually listen to the answer. Unfortunately, what usually happens in political conversations is that we're so busy thinking about what's wrong with what the other person is saying and thinking about how we're going to tell them it's wrong and how we're going to rebut their points, that we aren't actually trying to understand their perspective. So it's really important to pay close attention and make sure you get what they are trying to say. The third step is to reflect. And what reflect means is simply summarize back what the other person has told you so that they know that you listened. Don't assume that they know that you listened. Show them that you listened. And one of the biggest problems I find in conversations is that people don't feel heard. And the best way of making someone feel heard is to tell them what they told you. The fourth step in the cycle is to agree with what they said. And in some ways, this is the hardest part for a lot of people, because what they'll say is, but I don't agree, I disagree. And the reality is that when we disagree, we actually tend to disagree with just a very small part of what the other person is saying. It's the part that we're really emotionally attached to, but we're ignoring all the parts where we have agreement. And if you want to have an impact on another person and have them actually hear what you have to say, you first need to find those areas of agreement. And essentially what's happening there is you're forming an alliance. You're showing them that the two of you are on the same side. And then the final step in the cycle is to share. And the way you share your perspective isn't by making an argument. It's not by offering up reasons and facts, which tend not to get you very far, but rather to tell a story and share how you developed your perspective or a way in which this issue has impacted your life personally.
Great. Jill?
That was very helpful, and I'd like to introduce you to Emily. Emily is our program engineer for the show, our wonderful program engineer who's been here since day one, 3 years ago. And she actually has family members that fit this situation. So, Karin, I'd like to introduce you to Emily.
Yeah. Hi, Emily. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Hi, Karin. It's nice to meet you as well. And I've really enjoyed what you've said thus far.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
So, how do you want to get started? Would you, Karin, be the Republican, or are you going to be Emily? Or
Well, the way I usually do this, if it's okay with you, Emily, is I would like you to think back on a conversation you had that was really challenging for you. So, and imagine, someone from your life who you find it hard to talk with, and I want you to kind of channel them, try to, imagine the kinds of things they would say in a conversation. And then I'll demonstrate the way I would deal with it if I were you.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay. Is there any topic in particular that you want to talk about, something that you found hard?
Oh, I feel like it's the big ones: climate change, COVID, vaccines.
Okay. Those are all good.
Trump, a lot of those things have been really hot button items.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't we go with vaccines? Because I know that's on everybody's minds right now.
Okay. That sounds good.
All right. So I will start the conversation with an open-ended question. So, Emily, we've got this big family event that's coming up soon, and I've been asking everybody about their vaccination status, and I just wanted to hear from you. Where is your thinking on the topic of vaccines, and I want to hear your where you are.
Well, it's so weird to be my family.
I know.
But obviously I've heard a lot of the arguments, and they usually go something kind of like this. So I guess I don't believe in vaccines. I think that they can cause a lot of harm, and it will be over my dead body before you're going to put a needle in my arm.
Oh, wow. So it sounds like This is something you've given a lot of thought to, and you have some strong feelings about. Do you have any experiences that really shaped your thinking on this?
I've read a lot online, and I've watched a lot of videos on YouTube, and I've gained a lot of information, and I think that, we can all go out and do our own research, and we can come up with, our own facts and make decisions based on those.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you've been really doing your due diligence here. you don't like to be told what to do, like being having your own autonomy is really important to you. Is there anybody you've talked to about this?
Yes, I've talked to a lot of people about this. I've talked to my son, who's a doctor. I've talked to a lot of people about this, and this is how I feel.
Mm-hmm. Have you found that people are generally supportive of you? What have these conversations been like for you?
I think a lot of people in my community are really supportive. A lot of the people that I see on TV and that I interact with on a day-to-day basis, a lot of those people are really supportive of these ideas. It's people that I maybe don't see as often, or maybe just talk to on the phone, that I get kind of conflicting opinions on.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I'm glad to hear that you've been out there and getting lots of advice and doing lots of research, and those things are all really important. And I got to tell you, I totally relate to what you're saying about autonomy. And for me, bodily autonomy is really important too. I don't want people telling me what to do with my body. And when I go to see a doctor, right, I expect them to advise me and provide suggestions, but I don't expect them to force something on me, right? When I was going through my cancer treatment, it wasn't like I went to my doctor and just told them, do whatever you want with me. It was no. We sit down and we talk things through, and they tell me what the risks and benefits are. And then at that point, it's my decision. So does that sound like kind of how you feel about it too?
Yeah, that is how I feel, actually. That's exactly how I feel. It's my choice, and I don't need somebody telling me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you talked to your doctor too?
No, I actually haven't talked to my doctor.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Do you have a doctor you trust, or is your doctor not is this somebody who you wouldn't trust to advise you on something like this?
Actually, I don't actually have a doctor that I see regularly. Okay.
Well, I'm certainly not going to tell you what to do. My personal decision was to get vaccinated. I kind of I'm high risk because I've had cancer, and I have asthma, and I have family members who are high risk, and being a doctor, I feel pretty comfortable with vaccines and the science behind them, but it's, that's my personal decision about this. All I can tell you is it's been really good for me. It went fine. I didn't have any bad stuff happen. I know that doesn't mean that's how it is for everybody, but, for me it was good. And when I did get COVID, which I guess was inevitable eventually, it thankfully was mild, and I attribute that to having had the vaccine.
Yeah, well, that's great.
This might be a good time to break because it is because it's that time to break. But when we come back, I'd like to debrief that. We're speaking with Dr. Karin Tamerius, who is a political psychiatrist and the founder of Smart Politics. You're listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7 FM, Many Voices, One Station. Want a friend to hear this interview? Be Bold America is available as a podcast. Now your friends can listen for free on your favorite podcast platform, which is on Apple, Google, Spotify, Radio Public, and many more. I'm your host, Jill Cody.
Hello, K-Squid listeners. I'm Tom Hartman, and each weekday at 4 p.m., I bring you a different perspective on the news than you're likely to hear on most media outlets. Please join me on KSQD Santa Cruz, your ink spot on the dial for the Tom Hartman program, heard now for the first time ever in the Monterey Bay area at 90.7 FM, weekdays at 4 p.m. That's Progressive Talking Conversation with me, Tom Hartman, weekdays at 4 p.m. on KSQD 90.7 FM. Tag, you're it.
Today our topic is smart politics. Stop arguing, stop avoiding, start making a difference. We're speaking with Dr. Karin Tamerius, who is a political psychiatrist and the founder of Smart Politics. And I guess, Karin, the reason I was fumbling around there was that I was watching the clock, but I was also processing that role play in my mind. And so why don't you debrief us on it?
Yeah. First, thank you, Emily. That was a great job. And that was pretty typical, I find, of these conversations. If you notice, she was very defensive at first and very worried and wary about what I was going to say. So she kind of threw out a lot of stuff early on that was like, this is my decision and nobody's going to change my mind, and making it very clear that she was not open to any kind of rethinking of her position on this. And what I did was I gave her a lot of room to talk about her beliefs and where they came from, and I did everything I could to be non-judgmental, which is really one of the most important parts of the process, is letting people know that you're not going to force them to think the way you do. Because, ultimately we don't have the power to change other people's minds, and neither should we. It is, none of us has all the answers, right? So each person has to be able to make decisions for themselves, and so I let her know that I'm not going to try to control her. And then I reflected back the things that she was telling me about why she was worried about the vaccine, the importance of personal autonomy, the fact that she was doing her own research. And then I told her the ways in which I agreed with her. And I gave her an example from my personal life that showed where autonomy is really important to me, too. And so that she could know that I was very serious about that. And then finally, when I moved into my share, I gave an example of what the experience had been like for me, because a lot of people who decide not to get vaccinated are doing it out of fear. And providing my own personal example without any attached pressure is actually the best opportunity for making a shift here.
Well, one thing that I had learned, too, is for people to understand is that you actually talk about the emotions behind the words. And I thought you did that, too, because the emotion was the fear of being controlled. And you mentioned that, you don't want to be controlled. And so I thought that was really well done. Pettis?
I'd like to know what it felt like from Emily's point of view.
Emily was just, it's interesting because of COVID. We're now, Emily's in the studio and I'm in the production room. And Emily was just raising her hand. I saw that right when I was asking you the question. So, Emily?
Yeah, I just said a couple of things. First is that I was trying to actually replay a conversation that I'd actually had because this was it's a topic that it's really difficult for me and my family to discuss. But that was something that had actually happened, and it was just so interesting to see how calm and just the way that you responded to me was completely different than I have ever responded to these sorts of conversations. So that was really good to see. But the one thing that I was going to say that I really appreciated was like you felt almost like you were really curious about what I had to say, you know, and like what I was thinking. And yeah, there was just this kind of way that you seemed to be approaching it that, that was non-judgmental and led to this just like, I want to know more about you. It almost felt like it was trying to build intimacy, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. That is exactly how it's supposed to feel. Yes. We are building a relationship. These are relationship skills, and it's, you know, why should you listen to anything I have to say if you don't trust me, right? So the first step in these conversations is to build trust. I have to make you feel safe. You have to know that I'm not going to attack you or tell you you're a bad person. I'm not going to force you to think the same way I do. I'm going to show you that we have a lot in common. I'm going to invest in understanding who you are as a person, and I'm going to show you that I care about you as a person, that you're not just somebody who I'm telling what to do. You're somebody whose well-being is important to me.
Well, it seems, too, that this can happen in person-to-person conversations, but a lot of this discussion is on social media. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's a great question because people tell me all the time, oh, yeah, well, you can have these kinds of conversations face to face, but, you know, obviously they don't work on social media. And the reality is that I actually started doing this work on social media because I live, at the time I lived in Berkeley, California, and in Berkeley, you know, there aren't many conservatives. So the only way I could talk with conservatives was to get on Facebook and start reaching out first to conservative family members and then to friends of theirs. And so that was how I started having these conversations and actually how I developed the cycle. So you can have these conversations in a variety of settings. The interaction is essentially the same, whether it is written or spoken.
Fascinating. Now, Pennis, before we start our keep, start, stop, do you have a question?
You know, I don't, Jill. I think you've covered the ones that I had. This has been a fascinating dialogue.
It has.
And it's certainly added to what I learned when we went through your webinar. Do you have any more webinars coming up anytime in the near future for our audience?
I do. We have another introductory webinar coming up on February 9th. So that one's available, and then a more advanced webinar 2 weeks after that.
So if we took your first webinar, would we sign up for the advanced one next?
Yep.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Okay.
And that'll be at the last week in February.
Well, so in the last few minutes, what could listeners keep doing, stop doing, and start doing to advance this cause?
Well, the most important thing in terms of keep doing is keep your relationships. I find too often people cut off their relationships. Don't. Your relationships are your best method for influencing politics.
And I would say, after listening to you, keep calm.
And keep calm. That's right. Do your best to not get triggered. And if you do get triggered, that's okay. You can calm down and come back to the conversation. It happens. And then you wanted to know things to stop doing, right? I think, number one, stop telling people what to think. You know, let people make their own decisions. Your role in a conversation is to help people figure out what they think, and don't make people feel bad about themselves. When people feel bad about themselves, they can't think clearly or make good decisions. If we help people feel better, then they'll think more clearly and learn.
And I guess it's easier said than done, but to stop judging them I think that leads
Right.
to your open questions. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. We in the mental health field, we talk about it as unconditional positive regard, which is no matter what they say, we still love them and care about them as human beings.
And what should listeners start doing?
So start talking with people you disagree with. Start initiating these conversations and letting people know that you are willing to listen to what they have to say, and that you're not going to criticize them in the process.
Excellent. Well, I hope, my concern is I hope we have time to pull ourselves together, because, we just seem to be pulling ourselves apart, and there are many interests out there that benefit from polarization. And it seems to me that it's hard for everyone to see that happening in real time. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I refer to it as the political consulting industrial complex has a real financial interest in making us hate each other. Mm-hmm. That's what elections basically boil down to these days, and that's what they do all the time. We have to see past that, see past their interests in pitting us against each other, and stop thinking in terms of us and them, and start thinking just in terms of us versus our problems.
Mm. Well,
I think that's so well said.
Very well said.
Yeah. And it seems to me that what you've produced and are doing is really available to anyone who is working with belief systems. It doesn't matter what the beliefs are. We have to find ways to work through those so that we can find common ground and move forward.
So, Dr. Tamerius, I know Pettis and I really enjoyed this conversation today. I don't know if Emily liked being put on the spot.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Emily. I wish we had more time. Thank you for being our bold and impressive guest today. We appreciate you and what Smart Politics is achieving, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a joy.
Well, it's an honor for us. And remember, for more information and to sign up for Smart Politics training webinars, please visit joinsmart.org. What's up next on Be Bold America? We'll be discussing The Runaway Slave, The Life of William Grimes on Sunday, February 13th at 5 p.m. Pettis and I will have the honor to be speaking with Regina E. Mason, who is a direct descendant of that very runaway slave. William Grimes published an autobiographical narrative of his life in 1855 without deference to white editors or publishers. It is an immediacy, candor, and no-holds-barred realism unparalleled in the famous antebellum slave narratives of the period. So join us on Sunday, February 13th at 5 p.m. to hear from his direct descendant, Regina E. Mason, the unfiltered experience of a slave who ran away. Remember, Be Bold America is available as a podcast. Now you may listen to the show anytime for free. And I want to give a special thank you to Be Bold America's program engineer, Emily Donham, for her bravery today and being part of the show. And to our station program director, Howard Feldstein. And again to our bold guest, Karin Tamerius. You're listening to KSQD Santa Cruz, many voices, one station. Listen worldwide online at ksqd.org. Now listen to our own emeritus professor on things that might go boom in a war with Russia in our future. That's emeritus professor from UCSC, Dr. Ronnie Lifshutz. My name is Jill Cody.
And I'm Dr. Pettis Perry.
There you go. Thank you, Pettis, and thank you for listening to Be Bold America. Until next time, keep, stop, start.